Tanzu Tuesdays. Your host, Tiffany Jenigan.
Hey everyone.
Hey.
So this is going to be an interesting way of going about it since it's my first time actually like streaming it myself, hence the lack of my lovely background. Instead, you get to see my couch, which it's a nice couch, but it's probably not what you were looking for. But anyway, so yeah, today, first time, we'll see how it goes. If anything goes wrong, you can blame it on me. So today, Paul isn't able to join, so I stole Josh. So hi, Josh. Thanks for coming and joining us today. You're muted.
I said, thank you very much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, you get to be my helper in all the spring things, as I learned from the both of you.
I'm going to learn too. It's going to be fun. How about my coffee?
Of course, always the coffee. Also, I like your Pickle Rick shirt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're all so good. Oh, so
first, I'm gonna go into some of the like Tanzu Tuesday things, and also I think I'm hearing myself echo off of somewhere.
Is it me? Hold on, I'll try fixing it.
I don't. Nope, it's my fault. Of course, it's my fault. I muted the stream, but I didn't mute the stream. I don't know. It decided to not like me. There's always gonna be something going wrong, right? So this is Tanzu Tuesdays. If you haven't been before, we have episodes every single Tuesday at well, most every Tuesday, unless we say otherwise, but at 1 p.m. Pacific time. So next week on February 2nd, we have Martin Lippert, and he'll be talking about Spring Tools 4, and he'll also be doing a bunch of live coding, so that'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah. Martin's awesome. He was, by the way, is the echo gone on my side?
We're good.
You didn't have it in the first place, but just in case. Martin is awesome. He was just on the podcast, A Beautiful Podcast, where he talked about sustainable energy of all things. So like, it's a fascinating episode if you're interested. And then you want to see him live, you should absolutely go to that episode next.
Want to tell people how to get to the podcast?
Oh, just wherever. It's called A Beautiful Podcast, just wherever podcasts are purveyed. So, you know, Apple Podcast app or Google's podcast app or whatever. I mean, any pod burner, you know, anything will do just fine. Wherever fine podcasts are distributed.
Cool. So tomorrow, I see that at 12 p.m. Pacific time, you have a talk with Oleg Dakuka on RSocket. Want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so tomorrow Oleg is, so I was just interviewing him for the podcast, and he just joined our team. He just joined the Spring team just a minute ago, it feels like, and he's awesome. He's one of those people that if you're in the Spring community, you've no doubt seen his work, especially if you care about reactive programming, because he's been one of the front people of RSocket, right? This really amazing protocol. And so tomorrow, now that he's joined our team and he's, I can officially get him paid just to teach me stuff live. I invited him to come on to the show tomorrow and just teach me more about RSocket. He's been doing some really cool stuff about some of which I've been aware of, and I just wanted him to fill in the gap. So I'm just going to be just like, we're just going to sit here and he's going to answer my dumb questions live. I was thinking we could do a brain dump session, one-to-one, but then I was like, wait a minute, I would love to actually just share this. It'd be so cool if we could just turn on the microphone and put this on air. So he agreed, and that's what's happening tomorrow. We're going to learn more about all the cool stuff he's working on. And by the way, for those of you who haven't been paying attention to RSocket is a super neat binary protocol that reifies the concept of reactive programming over the network wire, right, over the wire. And it's awesome. It supports native back pressure. It's multi-platform, multi-language. People use it for communication between nodes, so it's like a better gRPC in that respect. But because it has so so many different dynamics for communication. It can actually do a lot of like proxy like things, and so a lot of people use it also like a sidecar. And in that particular context, as sort of like a mesh technology, it's been shown to be dozens of times faster than Istio and things like that for equivalent scenarios for everything except for mutual TLS. Obviously, there's no support there, so it's not a fair comparison. But it's just awesome. RSocket is something that we integrated into Spring in 5.2, so that's officially more than a year ago now. But unofficially, we've known about this protocol on the Spring team for a few years, right? Several years now, and we've spent our time integrating into Spring Framework, and then I concurrently spent time talking to people about it. And so, like, one person I showed was my buddy over at Alibaba, and now Alibaba is all in on RSocket, and to the point where they're actually now part of the same open source group as we are. So Alibaba, Spring Team, Facebook, a bunch of others have contributed to this reactive foundation, and one of the first technologies to get contributed is RSocket. So again, just imagine Facebook and Alibaba, the largest organizations on the planet, use this to scale, right? It's what allows them to do more than what they were able to do before, which is already incredible. So I can't wait to learn more about this protocol tomorrow.
Sounds like another thing to add to my very long list of things that I must learn.
Oh, it's me too. Like I literally wrote a book on and a chapter on RSocket, and it's still just, it's already, obviated by some of the new stuff that's already happening in that community, because there's so many interesting players doing so many interesting things with it. It's not obvious,
so,
it's just a foundation.
I think, like, I forgot to mention, but to see all the things that we have, just go to the website tanzu.tv, and I'll have all the different things there. So on Fridays, we tend to there's TGIK, which isn't run by us specifically, but we also stream it here. It's also on YouTube. So if you went to like tgik.io, for instance, it's still to be determined as to what's going to be happening this Friday, but generally speaking, it is on every Friday. Yes.
I have
questions. Like you have a question,
so
Josh.
You do TKIG, right? You're often on that one.
That's TGIK. I've done it once with Paul. We did Harbor.
Okay, and that's the Kubernetes-a-thon. That's like, wasn't that Joe Beta's thing? Is it still Joe Beta's thing? I haven't watched it in a minute, but
still Joe Beta's thing.
That's awesome. So that's really good. What else do we have on this channel? Because I only come when people ask me, but I don't actually, I don't know what all we have on the TV guide.
Yeah, so there's Between Chair and Keyboard. So that's with Nate Shuda. So it's basically like conversations with whoever he has on that day. So like on February 1st, and this is at 10 a.m. Pacific time, he has Michael Carducci. So they're going to be just having conversations during that.
He's a magician.
So, like he has oh, really?
Michael Carducci, yeah, he's amazing. He's a friend of mine. He's a mutual friend of ours. But yeah, I don't know how that's gonna. If he's gonna be doing video, then it's definitely worth, listening to him is gonna be amazing, of course. But he's a magician. You want to see him, right? It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure all of those are videos. At least last I was checking. So yeah, that'll be cool.
So
it's
cool.
a way for me to like figure out who a lot more people are seeing that since I started during the pandemic. I have a lot of people that I have no idea who they are yet.
I feel like you've been part of the family for like ever, so it's, what a weird year.
It's all of the Among Us gaming.
Mm-hmm. So this one.
Mm-hmm. And he has a bunch of all his he's probably the best at having upcoming video, like showing what the upcoming talks are. Like I'm not nearly as good at this.
Who Shuda?
Yeah.
Okay. I need to pay more attention.
You do. And there's Michael Cote has Tanzu Talk. I don't know if it was every day at 11 a.m. Central European time, but I don't know if it's currently still every day, but at least the previous talk, like podcasty video talk things are there. So that's kind of the whole thing of what we currently have that's ongoing. There's also Spring One Tour, but that's not going to be until like March, which we'll both be participating in.
I'm so excited about this.
And then so for things that are outside of our stuff, on the 28th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, there is an AMA with Joe Beta, who is one of the founders of Kubernetes. I will paste the link for this in Twitch. There's also some conferences coming up. So there's Dev Nexus on February 17th, and Mark Heckler and Nate Shuda from our team will be speaking at that.
Me too, I think.
Oh,
Me.
you too? I didn't see your name. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I should be, usually.
Okay.
Unless I'm not.
Well-
Maybe I'm not. I don't know.
It's okay. I may have missed it, and then I should fix that for the upcoming one. So I'll double check. So
Yeah,
either
please.
someone else wants
Maybe
to
I'm
tell
not.
me
I just usually am.
It's DevNexus, so DevNexus.com, and I'll check that out. So we'll see. And then on February 20th, there is Global Diversity CFP Day. So it's a bunch of like workshops designed to help people of underrepresented or marginalized groups become tech conference speakers. And there's different time zones for like a bunch of the different regions that were around the world. And that's at globaldiversitycfpday.com. And I'll also be posting that in Twitch. Josh and Ollie, do either of you have any upcoming events that we should be mentioning?
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Well, there's tomorrow. You already gave me that setup, so I appreciate that. Gosh. I'm doing the OOP German conference on the 9th of February. I'm doing a panel. I don't know for whom. I'm speaking to Seattle Jug remotely on the 16th of February. I'm speaking at Java Day Live, which is in Ukraine, on the 18th. Let me see. I'm speaking at the Java User Group Passau on the 9th of March, and then Spring One Tour, and then JPoint in the 12th of April. So that's the next few weeks. That's a Russian conference, the last one, JPoint.
What about you, Ollie?
I'm speaking at DevNexus, so that'll be a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Apparently, I really need to look at this to double check every time that I'm like having someone on to see if they're speaking at it. So I may have missed one or two people who are literally right here that are going to be speaking at DevNexus. So attend DevNexus.
Even if I'm not there, definitely attend it. It's an amazing show. Oh, you've got LeVar Burton too. That's amazing.
So yeah, do you have any other ones, Ollie, or are we kind of?
That's it for the moment. No.
Okay.
So
Cool.
DevNexus.
No more things.
is
No more events from you.
Yeah, no. So DevNexus is this. I don't know if people have heard of it. It's become kind of like the unofficial sort of, like it is a winter spring one. Like people in the spring team go there en masse. So it's the show that we've always supported. There's a huge contingent of people in the eastern part of the United States and in the South, and that happens to be perfect for both those crowds. So they both go to that show. We've always just patronized it for years. We even have some people on the spring team who are part of the committee that runs the show, right? So we've just always been big fans of it. So if you're on the fence about whether to go this year, I think it's free, isn't it?
It is, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're on the fence, this is the year
so.
to go. Yeah, register here for free. You should absolutely go to DevNexus. It's put on by the best people in the business. It's been around for decades. It's just awesome. Great people,
Did you find out if you're a speaker?
No, I'm trying to figure out what the
Yes,
price
you
was.
are a speaker.
You are, Josh, because I saw you on there.
Oh, okay, thank God.
You definitely are.
You are a speaker.
Okay,
All
good.
right. I think I just like basically scrolled through and was trying to find a face I recognized, and Mark and Nate were right next to each other. So I was like, oh, hey,
Oh, good. I'm so excited I'm speaking.
I will
I love,
update that.
I love this show. The best part is
Aw.
definitely not me. Look at all these, like Mala Gupta, she's a legend. She's been on my podcast as well. She'll be there. Yeah, go see the show, people.
Yeah, there's quite a few VMware people I see, like Bella Bai, Josh Cummings.
Exactly. Julian Dubois is not,
And
he's not officially spring team, but he's close enough. So lots of great people.
actually, I know quite a few people who are listed on here. So
Mhm.
just more people for me to figure out who all the rest are. So I guess I will be trying to attend it as well. But yeah,
Mary
so
Grig-
I think that's it for.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Mary Grigowski is amazing. Emily Jiang is from Microsoft, and she works on this Azure Spring Cloud stuff with us as well. So just so many great people, you know. Oh no,
Sweet.
I'm sorry. She's
So-
at IBM. I'm thinking of somebody else.
Terrible.
She's at IBM. She's also
And
awesome
I
too.
saw
though.
Ray Sang's on there too.
Oh yeah, our guy. Oh, that title, that abstract is a little out of date, isn't it? But yeah, he's great
Anyway.
too.
So, Ollie, where are you like joining us from?
So yeah, I'm from Southampton in the UK. So a little bit evening for me now, but not too late. So it's all good.
So it's like
and-
9:16 your time.
It is, yeah. But you know, sometimes it's nice to, you know, if I've got to stay up and if I get to communicate with colleagues across the Atlantic, that's always good, you know. So.
Is the light in your room a lamp?
But I don't know if I can
looks
show you.
like
It's so
it
cool.
looks like a
It's
real
like this
light.
super bright light that I got
It-
from Amazon. It's
It
really,
looks like
really good.
morning light. It looks like you're in the
Yeah.
morning.
It does.
It makes me feel awake. So at night. So it's I highly recommend one.
Cool. Where'd you get that?
All right,
Send me
I'll
that.
need to Amazon.
It's on Amazon. Yeah.
What is it called?
Daylight. It's just, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a daylight. It's proper like daylight. So it's got the right number of lumens, so it simulates sort of daylight. And it's
That
also
looks
good for
great.
video calls. Yeah, it's good for video conferencing.
Yeah, I want this because, like, literally, if I didn't know that you were in the UK, I would think you were on one of our time zones
Yeah.
because of how bright and sun-like it is in there. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah,
Super,
I'll send you
yeah.
a link. I'll send you a link.
I watch this guy on
Awesome,
YouTube who
and-
does these experiments with light, and he's got a 100,000 lumen flashlight, which is as soon as you turn it on, the whole room goes white with light. Right? It's incredibly bright. You know, the brightest flashlight ever. And I think he would be impressed with what you've done there.
I'm very pleased with it.
Also, Josh Sloan says they like your virtual background.
Virtual background. This is my real background. I'm at home. This is like Josh at home.
This is kind of funny because this is the first time I've been in a meeting where literally no one has a virtual background on.
I gave up like March of last year. Like March, 2 weeks into the pandemic, I'm like, I'm done with virtual backgrounds. This is dumb. I don't want to have to moderate what I wear just because of the algorithm, you know, for object detection.
As long as you don't turn on green screen, it's generally fairly okay. Or you could have like someone in a meeting recently, I saw waves going across their shirt because it picked it up.
So weird.
So, Ollie, want to tell us more about yourself?
Sure. So I've been I joined VMware through the Pivotal acquisition, and I've been on the Spring team now for over 4 years. So I work on the Spring commercial team, and we're really focused on bringing Spring products to commercial enterprise customers. So taking the open source software and adding more enterprise features around that, such as security and deployment, and running on Kubernetes and Cloud Foundry. So that's my main focus. And also,
is this what we would have called Spring Cloud Services a year ago?
That's right. And now we're focusing on Spring Cloud Gateway for Kubernetes, and also Spring Cloud Services for Kubernetes as well. So we still support Cloud Foundry, but we're moving the platform onto Kubernetes.
It's kind of cool, like seeing, because like I've had like some experience with Kubernetes, and then there are people who have experience with Spring, and they were just like, here's Kubernetes, here's Spring, and then just like watching like the intersection of the two has been really awesome.
Yeah, and it's getting better and better. It's such a fast-moving, fast-paced technology, both Spring and Kubernetes, and it's just getting better and better. And I remember when I first sort of played with Kubernetes, it was just so much of a headache, so much YAML, so much pain. But now it's a lot easier, in my opinion.
Are you
Cool. Well,
so? How strong is your Helm foo?
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, average. Paul's really good. Helm, I know.
Yeah,
yeah,
so
Paul's very good at Helm.
Yeah, what do you use to deploy the system?
So Skaffold for when I'm actually sort of doing the development, and that's what I'm going to do with some live coding today. Use Skaffold to actually tie everything together. So tie together the manifests and the image building, and that will deploy it onto my local cluster. But in reality, when we actually release our product, it's a Helm chart ultimately.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I wondered.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm excited. Good to see you.
Yeah.
You ready to have us disappear and kick things off?
Yeah, sure. Let's go for it.
Cool.
Break a leg.
See how this goes.
Thank you. Cool. So I hope everyone can see my screen. So what I wanted to run through with you today is really my top tips for how to build Spring Boot applications for Kubernetes. So as part of my role on the Spring commercial team, we've been building a Java Spring Boot project for Kubernetes, and we've picked up quite a few different sort of tips and tricks along the way. So I just wanted to sort of go through really and do some live coding and show you what I think is some good techniques and tools to sort of pick up if you are a Spring engineer, or if you're just interested in using Spring and deploying to Kubernetes. So really, I'm just going to kick right off with the sort of live demo really. So the first thing I'm going to do is just download from start.spring.io a starter project, and that's the project that we're going to just take and deploy to Kubernetes, and just show a nice easy way of doing that. So to start with, I'm going to use the this Spring CLI tool. You can download this. It's on the sort of Spring website. I downloaded it using Brew if you've got a Mac, so that's really easy. And you've got this init command, and the init command just means it's going to go off to start.spring.io and download the project for you. And we can set what type of build. I want Gradle because I prefer Gradle. And dependencies. Today I'm going to use web and actuator. I'm not using the reactive. I probably could have just used reactive web, but I'm just keeping it as simple as possible today. So it's just the normal boring web MVC. And that's just the name of my folder. The project is going to be top tips boot. So yeah, going to our start.spring.io service. And hopefully that's populated this directory here, top tips boot. Okay, and here we go. So what I'm going to do, I use IDEA IntelliJ most of the time. So I'm going to be using that for the live coding today. You can do this as well in VS Code. It sort of supports all the same sort of features and things. So probably just going to take a little while for it to do sort of its caching. It's been quite quick today. So we've got, what have we got here? So we've just got our demo application that we downloaded. So first thing I'm going to do, just for our testers, we're going to need sort of some way of testing our app. So I'm just going to put a very simple API endpoint in here, so we can add REST controller in, and we can add a get mapping, and I'm going to have my get mapping to be demo, and then I'm going to do public string demo, and I'm just going to return a very simple example. Really the focus is going to be on how to get this app deployed in the most streamlined way possible. So just going to really simple hello world style app to begin with. We'll add a few more things later, but just for now, keep it really simple. Okay, so that's kind of the simplest sort of boot app you could ever wish for, really. So the next thing I actually need to do, and I forgot to do this last time, is when we deploy this to Kubernetes, we're going to use a git char as our tag. So for that to work, I'm actually going to need to initialize this as a Git repository. So I'll just quickly do that as well. And then the start.spring.io has actually added the git ignore in for me, so I don't need to worry about that this time. So, cool, there we go. So the next thing I'm going to do is create some of the manifests that are needed for Kubernetes. Now, in the past, this used to be really quite painful, but there's sort of quite a few tools now to make this a lot easier, which I'm going to sort of run you through. So the first thing is I'm going to create a deployment. Now the deployment, if you're not familiar, that's really just a way of to tell Kubernetes how to manage your containers, which sort of environment variables they have, this kind of thing, and how many replicas they have. So I'm using what's called the Google Cloud Code plugin for IntelliJ, and that's got some really, really helpful snippets. So I'm going to use the snippet. So we've got Kubernetes deployment, and there we go. So I'm going to call the name, I think I said I'm going to call it Top Tips Boot, I think. So let's rename it Top Tips Boot. And then also I'm going to name these Top Tips Boot. There we go. And the image down here, I'm going to change this. So I'm using a, so this is going to be my local registry, which I've just got installed locally. And I do recommend doing this because it's a lot safer. If you're sort of developing locally, you might not want to have all of your, you might accidentally push to a public registries, and it's also a lot quicker if you deploy to a local registry. So I definitely recommend setting this up. I don't want to go through the process of setting up because it's a little bit, takes a while, but there's plenty. You can use Helm to install a local Docker registry on Kubernetes. So I've just done this sort of, here's one I prepared earlier kind of thing. So we've got the, so the name of the registry and then the name of the image I want to create. So it's going to be Top Tips Boot. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to type that correctly. So the next thing we're going to do is create what's called our liveness and readiness probes. So we've got two of these. Again, if you're not familiar with this, so the liveness probe is like a health indicator, and it just, the Kubernetes API will check the pod periodically to see if it's alive. Again, we've got this auto completion. So as I was saying, it makes life a lot easier sort of to do now. So the port is going to be same as the container port 8080, and the path is going to be, so this is again something that Spring Boot does for us automatically. If we've got the actuator dependency, which I did add earlier, we get for free these sort of probe checks. So we got one here, actuator health liveness. This is something Boot gives us for free, and then we create the readiness probe. And the path is going to be basically the same. These are really important to configure because if you don't configure it, the sort of Kubernetes API won't know if your app's got a problem. It won't know to restart it. So this is something you should always sort of do even for sort of development applications. So next thing I'm going to do is the resources, and this is like the limits, this sort of amount of CPU and memory that Kubernetes will give the pod. Now I just sort of use a kind of a rough guess here, but in my experience, this is what I found sort of works. So request is like the minimum, the sort of starting point, and I set this to around, and it does sound quite big, but I usually set this to around sort of 756, something like that. And I set the limits to be the same, just because when you've got the actuator running, this is just going to mean it the app starts off quite a lot quicker. You can play with this, but this is just a sort of a default that I found is sort of fairly useful for a boot app.
Yeah. But what does that memory analyzer of ours do? Wouldn't that give us the numbers if we wanted to? I always wondered about that. What's the relationship here between, because the Java virtual machine is one of the few things where if you ask it to contain its own memory, it'll do it, right? It'll actually bound its own memory.
It will.
Whereas
it will.
Most other languages won't.
It will, and because we're going to use the Cloud Foundry build packs as well, that's going to run the Java memory calculator. So I'm basically going to set a ceiling here, and then the memory calculator, the JVM memory calculator, is just going to set like a headroom maybe of 10%. It's going to, and that will actually work out all of the XMS for us automatically. So this is the only thing that we really need to worry about. The only advice I generally give here is just don't, if you set it low, it will work, but it's going to be slower. So this will, and this is what I found anyway. So if you set it if you set it too low, it will work, but your app might take 10 seconds to start up. But here it should only take, sort of 3 seconds to start up.
Right.
What I do with CPU, I usually set 500M, which is half a CPU, and I leave it unlimited here, just because what that means is that the minimum that Kubernetes will give the pod is half a CPU, but if it needs more, it will take more. So it just means you end up with a sort of a faster service. So that's pretty much it now for our deployment. So not too bad, 32 lines of YAML, but I think the code completion made that all a lot better. Next thing we need is a service. So again, create a new file, service.yaml. Again, we can hopefully use our Kubernetes service, and it's going to be top tips. I don't like calling it /service. I'm just going to call it the same name as the deployment. I'm quite happy with that. And the app is going to be, again, it's going to be top tips boot. And I usually change this to load balancer. This is one of these areas that does get really confusing. So so I'm running a local cluster on my laptop. Normally load balancer won't work because it only works on a cloud environment where Kubernetes knows how to actually create a load balancer. But what I've done, I'll just quickly show you. I've got this tool called Metal LB, and it's really cool. I definitely recommend sort of using it. And what it does, it uses this kind of layer 2 networking, and it will allocate load balancers using my local network. So I'll basically, when you create a load balancer, that will assign with an IP from my local network. So if you don't have this, it won't work. So you need to set up this Metal LB tool for this to work.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so definitely recommend that. Okay, so I think that's all I need.
Does it give you an IP in the address, or does it give you the DNS?
You can, there's another tool called external DNS that you can do, and that will also give you a DNS, and you can set that up. So you can have like a local DNS server, and you can set that up.
Yeah, okay. I think it's AWS where if you look at the services and then it shows you the external IP, it actually shows you a DNS, even though it says external IP under the service column. It shows you a DNS entry or something because of the way that their load balancer works. I'm just wondering if this one gives you actual DNS or what? Like, what is the thing that shows up in the service?
So you're not going to get that for free. You're just going to have, unfortunately, you can just get the IP address, but
right, which was better, what I want. Yeah, perfect.
Better than nothing. So that's a service. That's sort of pretty simple. Then finally, create a namespace. If we don't create a namespace, it's just going to end up in the default namespace. Usually not what we want. So we want to create our own namespace. Again, I should be able to. So I'm just going to create a generic resource, I think. Kubernetes. Actually, it's not really giving. Before it was giving me an option for a. Okay, I'm just going to have to create this myself. It's fine. Kind. Just going to cheat. And I'm going to call it top tips.
Isn't that funny? You have to like paste in a whole YAML file for it to know that it should give you help for YAML.
Yeah.
And then you can actually hack and get what you wanted.
Yeah, you kind of get there in the end, don't you? So I'm going to introduce now. So I've created my 3 manifests using the kind of code completion. Now I want to make life even easier. So I'm going to introduce a new tool called Kustomize. And I kind of think of Kustomize as like the glue between these 3 manifests. It's just really going to make the deployment a little bit easier. But I can generate this Kustomize manifest. So I'm going to go to my command line now, and the tool I've got installed. Just going to make sure I'm in the right directory. So in this cage directory, and that's going to be Kustomize, create. Now I'm going to send it this flag auto detect. And what that's going to do is it's going to detect those 3 manifests and add them to the kind of, think of like Kustomize like a parent manifest really, and it will just, and you can do loads of other things with, this is like the most basic use case of Kustomize. I'm sure you can do a lot more with it. This is just kind of a convenience really. So it's going to reference those manifests I created. And then I'm going to set the namespace. Top tips, I called it. So this will automatically set. So instead of having to, in those 3 manifests, instead of having to write namespace in each one, Kustomize will do that for us. That's another just small thing that it does. We can also set some labels in here. They're not super important. They are important actually. So because you can use labels kind of for querying your app. I'm just going to copy and paste it. It's a bit long, but this is one I quite like to add. Ooh, that was not what I wanted to do. Excuse me. I'm going to have to abandon my command. Completely went wrong then. Ooh. Okay, so the label I wanted to add, I'm just going to type it. It's got to be easier.
Yeah, copy pasting it sometimes is hard.
I know. Why? So I'm setting just an indication that I'm running the Spring Boot framework, Spring Boot 2.4. I just find that useful, and then I can see, which Kubernetes manifests relate to sort of running boot. So here we go. Now I'll go back to my IntelliJ, and we should have a new file called, so what it's done, it's automatically referenced the deployment namespace and service, and it's gonna, so for each of these, so at the moment there's no namespace, just a name. It will automatically sort of do that. And what I can actually do to show it is just type in here, I could do a dry run. So if I do Kustomize build, you can see now it's automatically added. So we go to the top here. Yeah, so you've got our deployment. It's automatically added in namespace. It's automatically added in these labels as well. So it's kind of just a convenient way of tying things together. So now I'm going to introduce yet another tool, this time one called Skaffold. So using the Cloud Code plugin, I can automatically generate the, if I type add Kubernetes support, if I do that, see magically, there we go, we've got a scaffold.yaml. Great. So what this, now Skaffold does a lot of things, so you have to bear with me, and maybe a little bit easier for me to actually run it and kind of talk through what's happening. But essentially, it's the local development workflow for Kubernetes. So it's going to build your image, it's going to create an image tag for it, and then it's going to deploy it to the cluster. And it can also sort of watch for changes. So any change that you make in your code, it will automatically rebuild your code, rebuild the image, deploy to K8s. So it just saves you, like, it saves you sort of quite a few fiddly things. So for example, let's say I wanted to change the tag, so I had a v1 tag. So normally I'd have to kind of go into my into my manifest here and kind of go v1, but Kustomize will actually automatically rewrite the deployment for us. So it's really almost bringing the CF push. If you're familiar with Cloud Foundry, you type CF push to your app and it will automatically kind of figure out what dependencies you need and do everything for you. So Skaffold in conjunction with build packs, especially, really does bring it a lot closer to the sort of Cloud Foundry experience. So there's one. Cool.
Sorry, I was just gonna, unless you were gonna mention, I was just gonna mention like what build packs kind of are.
Go for it.
Yeah, so basically, like if you're used to like using a Docker file and filling out everything there for running applications, basically with build packs instead you just start with what your code is, and from that code the build packs will end up creating a Docker create the Docker image for you. So, and then you can also push it up to whatever registry that you decide. And so you don't have to do that yourself and worry about an extra file. It just kind of does it for you for a bunch of different languages.
Really good explanation. Thank you. So this auto-generated scaffold file, there's one thing that I'm not happy with, and it's using Google's own build pack. I don't really like that one. I've played with it, and it seems to make some assumptions that you're running on a Google Cloud environment, and it just doesn't feel as sort of fast and as lightweight. So I changed that to use Paketo build packs, which is it's part of the Cloud Native found at CNCF project now, and that's the sort of main sort of open source distribution of the sort of build project. So that's just one thing I make sure to change. So now I think we're good. So now we can deploy to Kubernetes. So that was, I guess there was a little bit fiddly, but not too bad, I'd say. So I mean, I had to write some YAML, but most of it was sort of generated or kind of auto completed. So in theory I should have to do now is type scaffold. So there's two commands, there's scaffold dev and there's scaffold run. So scaffold run will just do a deploy. Scaffold dev will sort of deploy and sort of watch. So just begin, I'll just do scaffold run because I'm going to make some changes later. Oh, I'm in the wrong directory. So this might take a little bit of time. So I just want to talk you through the sort of process as and when it. So you can see, I'm going to kind of scroll back up. Okay, so what has happened, it's generated the tags, and this is quite a crucial thing because it's generated a tag based on my Git SHA. And now, so if I had multiple people sort of deploying to the same local registry or the same Docker registry or something, then this just means that you're not overwriting different images, and the actual Kubernetes deployment will automatically pick up that it's on using this tag. And what it's doing now, it's going to take a little bit of a while, but when it does the build, so when it does like the Gradle install, instead of doing that on your local machine, it's actually going to do that inside of a Docker image, which again is really, really good because it means that you don't get this situation where, you know, one person's running an older version of Java, one person's, you know, got some weird install or something, because all going to, if you're working on a team, you can get a real kind of good guarantee that you're going to be building in exactly the same environment. So unfortunately, it's doing a bit of downloading. I hope this was gonna be cached, but so I have to wait for this a little while, unfortunately.
It's usually pretty quick, but yeah, the first time it can be slow, but once it's cached, it's really nice. And by the way, just not strictly speaking related to this, but kind of related to this, I'm using the Apple Silicon M1, and I just learned yesterday that thanks to our buddy Sergey, I just learned that you can actually run Docker Desktop, which I knew about, on Apple Silicon, and you can get the Spring Boot Maven plugin for build packs to work. That didn't work before. There's a weird hack that Sergey discovered, and so check my Twitter. It's too technical, but
that's really cool. How are you finding the M2 Mac?
M1, yeah, it's
M1
I mean, there's some issue. Like I tried to do this, you know, the build pack from within the Maven plugin. I tried to do that for the native images yesterday, and it didn't quite work. I think the problem is that I don't know, but it just keeps on dying kind of midstream, and I think part of the issue is that it just requires too much memory. Like the M1 is 16 gigs of RAM, which you don't really, you don't bemoan the 16 gigs. I've never needed more than 16 gigs because it's so fast, but now I do, right, for this GraalVM stuff. GraalVM inside of Docker, you know, but at that point you're asking for some issues, so that doesn't quite work.
I've been using a remote Docker, so I've got a VMware Fusion, and that's running Linux, and I use that as my remote Docker just because I found that local Docker on my Mac was always making the fan spin up. So yeah, I've done that, and that's actually been quite, I mean, it's not ideal, but it makes me feel happy because, you know, my fan isn't constantly sound like a jet engine.
Yeah, I haven't had the fan spin up on the new one, but on my old 19-inch, my 16-inch 2019 64 gig, you know, pepperoni and sausage MacBook Pro, that one, my God, you don't know how much that thing spins up and spins up the fans until you've started using something that doesn't do that all the time. And you start, every time I go back to it, I'm like, oh wow, it's about to take off, you know?
Wow. Yeah.
Our Venkat Subramaniam, Dr. Venkat Subramaniam had a great tweet a few months ago where he talks about how every time he does a video presentation in the age of the pandemic, he feels compelled to grab hold of his laptop by both hands for fear that it might take off when it starts doing Zoom presentations. You know, you can hear the fans whirring, you know. I thought that very droll.
I don't know what it is with Zoom. Zoom seems to be the #1 fan spinner.
After Slack. Yeah, Slack is my personal nemesis.
I even found this really weird thing on my Mac. If I plugged in the power on the right-hand side, the fan came on less than the left-hand side. It seems to be.
I had that with my old, not old, but the 2017 Dell Precision that I had with 32 gigs and all that stuff. It's not a Mac. You can do USB-C, and you can do, they have a proprietary plug. And I don't know why you would just not use USB-C for both, but if you tried to plug in the plane, tried to plug the laptop on the plane through the USB-C port, the fans would just go crazy. It would heat up like crazy. Whereas if I could somehow draw enough power in the regular power cable, like the problem is that it required more power than the plane was emitting, and in theory it could charge, but slowly on the USB-C. But for some reason, it really hated that. It got upset and started the fan started spinning. Why? Well,
Technology is hard.
yeah. I mean, I couldn't build a laptop, so I guess I don't get to complain too much. But it's really crazy.
So
Oh,
it looks
did it
like
work?
this is, yeah, it works. So let's have a look. So I'm going to introduce another little cool thing. So I use these really cool aliases, and this one is shortcut for cube ctl get all, but that's too much typing. So I just type KGA, and there's loads of them, right? There's like K get service, and I actually print out here at the bottom of my screen what so for when I'm doing web demos, you can kind of see. And there's another tool, this is a separate install, but it's called KubeNS, and this is just a really useful way to change your namespace in Kubernetes. So at the moment we're in default, but we don't want to be there. We want to be in top tips. So that's a really easy way of changing your namespace. So let's do KGA again, and we've got our deployment, which is ready 1 out of 1, and we've got our, so we can have a quick look at the logs. Another tool here. As I'm dropping them in fast today, I'm afraid, but they really are worth getting these extra tools because they're super useful. So this one's called Stern for looking at logs. So if I just do Stern top tips, and then we can kind of just see that we've had our Spring Boot app loaded. And so going back to this memory calculator, so because we're using build packs here, you can see it's added in. This has figured that out. It's figured out XMX for us. It's, you know, it's done something sensible that we didn't have to worry about. So really cool. And if we do kubectl get service, we can see, as I mentioned before, we've got this magic kind of IP allocation thing. You don't need to do this, but I just find it's quite useful. So now we should be able to do curl or AT/demo. And Kate's is easy. Yes, it is when you, yeah, it is. So, okay, so this is all well, but in reality, probably one of the most common things that you want to do with a Spring app is to sort of change some of the configuration sort of Spring properties. So normally you've got a file called application.yaml, and that normally, or application.properties, mind you, that normally lives here. But because we're on Kubernetes, we're not going to do that. We're going to do it a different way. We're going to mount it as a config map. So the benefit is that doing it that way is that it means you can just edit it on the fly without doing a rebuild. So it's a lot easier to have it external to the application. So let's quickly do that. So let's add our application.yaml file. And I'm just going to add in, I mean, logging level, that's one I normally sort of want to sort of change quite often. So let's say logging.level. It's going to be, so this maps to the package name of the thing that you want to change logging for. So I'm going to change org.spring framework web, and I'm going to change it to debug. So now again, we can use Kustomize to generate this config map for us. So we're going to have a config map generator and give it a name. Let's call it Spring application config, and it's going to be from a file, application.yaml, and you can kind of tell that it worked because it kind of automatically will sort of give you that syntax highlighting. So unfortunately, it's not. There's a little bit more we need to do. So we need to go in and edit our deployment. Now this bit is a little bit annoying, I suppose, but so what we need to do is create a volume and a volume mount. So because it's going to be the config map is just like a volume in Kubernetes, so it needs to be sort of mounted to the pod. So the first thing we do is, this is where the YAML does, I find the YAML does get a little bit hairy at this point, but luckily the so volume mounts, this is where the code completion really does sort of come into its own. So the mount path, now because we're using build packs, I know for a fact that it's going to mount my application into workspace. And then if I put it in a directory called config, then Spring will automatically know to look in any directory called config in your application code. It will automatically scan there. And then I'm just going to give it another directory. I don't know if I have to do that, but just call it top tips again. Top tips, and then the name is this is going to be the actual name of the volume itself, which I haven't created yet. So I'm going to just call it Spring Application Config Volume. Okay, just copy and paste that because I need to do some out YAML now, which is it's a bit. So yeah, volumes, and then it's going to be the same name, Spring Application Config Volume, and then it's going to be from a config map, and then the name of the config map, which is going to be sort of Spring Application Config. So it's actually giving me the grey squiggly line, if you can see that, saying that the config map's not found. That's because we kind of get Kustomize to sort of generate it for us. So it's just, I mean, it's kind of you could generate the config map yourself. I just find that using Kustomize just ties everything together neatly. So what we should be able to do now is run Skaffold run again, and then that will give us a config map.
Plus, one of the things I love about Kustomize is that you can point it to a file full of keys and values, and it'll turn that into an environment variable as well, environment variables.
Yep.
Like dynamically generated values that you need.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, there's loads and you can do things like give it just a fragment of YAML, like give it like just one key you want to change and it will just override that. There's heaps of stuff. So what I'm going to do first is do this like a dry run thing. I don't actually need to run Skaffold again, I don't think. So I'm going to try it without running Skaffold just because it might be quicker. So we can just do Kustomize build just to make sure it kind of worked as we wanted it to. So yeah, it's given me a config map here, my name, and it's given that in the same namespace. It's dumped my application.yaml in there. And this is kind of a cool thing that Kustomize does as well. I must admit, I don't sort of fully understand it, but it gives it this hash suffix. And I think what that means is that what Kustomize will be able to do is change that config map and it will sort of automatically restart the container, restart the deployment. So that's the reason. So if you change that config map, Kustomize will give it a new hash, it will edit the deployment, and that will force the deployment to do a rolling restart so your app picks up the new config. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I think I can just pipe this to kubectl apply. And I've got a shortcut KAF, and then minus just means take from a standard input. So hopefully this is going to work. Might not. But yes, it did. Good. So what we should see now, if I do Stern again, top tips, we should see that it restarted. Though I've got a feeling that it hasn't quite worked, because what I might actually try and do, I think I might have got this, maybe, I'm not sure if maybe having this extra directory is confusing, maybe Spring's not picking up the config, so I might just try and change this and make sure that that's working okay. Because what I'm expecting just is that you should see some debug logging, because every time the actuator calls the boot app, that will kind of register the request. So that doesn't seem to be happening right now. So let's give it another go. I might have to do a restart of the deployment. Let's try that. So what you can do in Kubernetes is another cool tip. You can do it's like K rollout restart deployment, and the name of my deployment top tips boot. And what that would do is kind of a zero downtime deployment. And oh, that's maybe my problem. Error image pool. It's weird. I think I've tried to be clever, and I've kind of shot myself in the foot here, because I think what's happened is that I did a Skaffold run before, and I think that changed the tag in the deployment. So I think I'm just going to do a Skaffold run again, because I think that's why it's not working properly. So excuse me for that. been having the reason I was trying to avoid Skaffold is I've been having a few problems with it lately. Just actually today, mostly that it's not finding my cache. I've got something configured here that every time Skaffold runs, it rebuilds the image again, which is really quite annoying. But especially when you're trying to give a demo in limited amount of time. But yeah, not to worry. Yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate. We're gonna have to wait for this.
Someone was asking a question if this will later use Spring Cloud Gateway at all. And I don't know the answer to that, so I figured I would ask you.
No, it won't, but our DevNexus talk is all about Spring Cloud Gateway, so on Kubernetes. So it's I would like to do like maybe a second. I'd be happy to do another talk on using Gateway for Kubernetes, because one of the things that we do in our DevNexus talk is use Gateway as an OAuth 2 proxy for your application. So you put the gateway there, and that adds in. It will automatically do the OAuth 2 sort of credentials flow and redirect you to the login page, and then it will relay the JOT token to your application. So that's like a really cool way. So gateway can be used on Kubernetes.
And we'd definitely be interested in having you back again. So.
Oh, thanks. Ah, cool. So it's worked. So I've got my debug logging. So that's basically what I wanted to do. Wanted to show you, and so now we can do, if I do kgcmk get ctl get ConfigMaps, we can see it's there. I can edit that. I can do k edit.
And you're getting asked if there's a Git repo for this demo.
Yeah, well, I only created it today, but I'll push it so you can sort of have a look. So there's extra, I've got some other bits I can do as well. I can sort of stop here and do questions, or I can go a bit further. I was going to add a secret as well, but I'm not sure how we're doing for time and things. So it might be.
I'd love to see all that.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Do we have any hard stop, Tiffany?
Nope.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, so we've seen how we can externalize using a config map, which is cool, but sometimes you also want to store sort of credentials in Kubernetes as well. So and we've got the power of Spring Security as well. So what I'm going to sort of show you is how you can use a secret in Kubernetes, and Spring Security can then pick that up and use that to sort of populate the user detail service in Spring. So first thing I'm going to do is change some of our Java code to add in some of the Spring Security configuration. So first things first, I need to add in the Spring Security dependency in Gradle. So simply duplicate that line. Okay, then refresh. So then I'm going to take a tip from Josh, just quite nice to sometimes put everything in this one file for sort of demo purposes. So let's add in some more stuff in here.
So useful. Especially when you're trying to sketch something out, you just want to see all the moving parts in one place. I always start the same code page. You know who got me into that? Dave Sire, Dr. Sire.
Wow, really? Yeah,
that's
really cool. So I've got this enable web security. This is, I had to Google this because I've just been doing reactive security, and it's a bit different to the configuration. I completely forgot how to do web MVC security, but we need to extend the web security configure adapter.
I think that's one of those things where people don't really appreciate that you can have multiple code. You know how many people ask me, they don't think you can actually have multiple classes in the same code page. They didn't even appreciate that it's possible. You can't have multiple public classes, but you can have package private, and you can do it all day, right? Just forever. And with Spring, if you're doing your design right, you shouldn't have that many public classes anyway, right? It shouldn't be exporting types to the world.
Yeah. So we need this password encoder. It's going to sort of crypt our password that arrives from our secret. So this is kind of boilerplate, so it's not really that interesting, but just sort of standard stuff you need to do when you're setting up. So we've got a password encryptor. And what I'm going to do is just create just a sort of a little pojo at the bottom here, just to capture the so the secret. What's going to happen is that the secret in Kubernetes is going to be mounted as environment variables, and those are the things that Spring has access to. And Spring has really cool support for sort of marshalling the values from sort of using environment variables and marshalling them into sort of pojo. So I'm going to set up a little configuration properties class, call it top tips.security, and that's going to be a static class. And I'm just going to add in private string username. And then we can do getter and setter. Should I do it down here? Getter and setter. Okay, so that's just going to contain what we pass from the secret to the environment variable. That's where we kind of get access to it in Java at that point. So now what do we need? We need a user detail service, kind of more boilerplate here, I'm afraid, but I'll just sort of, you've probably seen this if you've used sort of Spring sort of much before. User details service. And that's going to auto wire in that password encoder. And we're going to auto wire in the, actually I'm going to need to enable configuration properties. Okay, and then I should better auto wire that in. Yeah, I was doing this before. I don't know why it's not very happy. It says it can't auto wire, but it should be able to. Sure
I don't know what I would do without autocomplete.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing, really, isn't it? How much it helps. Okay, so let's do. We need to create some user details, and this is the bit where we're actually going to sort of set up for the sort of user that we'll use for basic authentication. So user equals user dot with username. The username is going to be for my user properties. So get username and dot password. And there's now going to be my password encoder. Dot encode. User properties. Get password. And we also need to give it an authority, which is just kind of a dummy authority, really. It just has to have one. Maybe role underscore user, and dot build. Let's tidy that up. And then we can semicolon return new. It's going to be in memory because we haven't got a database or anything. User. Okay, now this is the fun part that we all love so much, is our sort of ant matches, setting up the actual rules and things. This is the bit I just couldn't remember how to do before I had to Google it. But, so we need to because we've extended this web security configure adapter, we need to override the configure method. Void configure. Takes an HTTP security as an argument. And then we can just set up the sort of rules that we're going to need. So we're going to say authorize requests, and then ant matcher. And what we need to say, this is really important actually, that we need to say that the actuator doesn't have security because Kubernetes uses our actuator to make sure that our pod is up and running. So if you added basic authentication, you would need to tell Kubernetes how to actually, authenticate, which I'm not sure you might be able to do, but I haven't done that before. It might be possible. But, so we're going to say that's anonymous. Funny why that's gone red, but I need to add exception. There we go. And then we're going to say any request is authenticated and it's HTTP basic. You can say it has with defaults, static import that, make it a bit cleaner, and that's it. So hopefully that should just be enough for now our app knows how to at least do basic security, but we still need to create a secret for it to use. So let's go ahead and do that next. So what we need to do is, again, in our Kustomize, I'm going to get Kustomize to do the secret. You could create it yourself. There's other ways you can do this. This is kind of I find this is the easiest way. I'm going to give it a name, user creds. And then I'm going to, I'm just going to, I mean, you shouldn't do this, but I'm just going to do literal username equals Alice, password equals test. So now we need to go back to our, so this will generate a secret of the name user creds here, but we need to mount this into the deployment, but we do it with a secret, we do it a little bit differently. So what we're going to do this time was actually, instead of mounting it as a volume, we're going to mount it as an env, environment variable. So, and this is important. So now we need to give this this name we give it needs to map to our what we called our configuration. So it's top tip security, but I usually find it's, for me anyway, I like to have them in capitals, so I can say top tips underscore security, and then sort of Spring will know when that to marshal that, it will match that variable and marshal it into the POJO. So now we need to do value from, and then secret key ref, and the key is just going to be user. So we can have two. One's going to be username. Oh, don't know why I did that. Somehow cache some old sort of version I had. The name is going to be user creds. Actually, I just realized that actually also has to have username as well. Okay, and now I'm just going to duplicate that, because we're going to have one for the username, one for the password. Change that. The key is going to be password. This auto completion actually isn't very helpful this time. But again, it's recognizing that the secret doesn't exist because it actually doesn't yet, because Kustomize is going to create it for us. So hopefully with a bit of luck, I should just be able to deploy this, and it may or may not work. I hope it does work, but let's see. So again, I need to do, it's really unfortunate my scaffold is not caching at the moment, so it just slows things down a bit. But I'm just going to do scaffold run again, and hopefully that will give us what we want, and we will be able to use the username Alice and the password test to access our API. So the other sort of really good thing about using kind of secrets in this way, again, it's just because having it external to your application means it's a lot easier to do things like rotate the password. So instead of the password being sort of encrypted in the data in some unknown database, it's at least, if you've got access to the Kubernetes cluster and you've got the sort of right permissions for that secret, you can you can manage it, or you can change that secret. So it's quite sort of a powerful concept. I mean, in reality, you're probably not going to be using sort of basic authentication, but there's still definitely cases where you need to, you might need to store the client ID and client secret. If you're using OAuth 2, you might need to store TLS keys, that kind of thing. I mean, for demo purposes, basic authentication is just an easy thing to demo, really. But I think these days we're not sort of using it as commonly, but it still does, it still does get some use. Even OAuth 2 does often use basic authentication, just when you actually go and get your token. So that part of the OAuth 2 flow does often still use basic auth. So it's not dead, maybe basic, but it still does have its use cases.
Well, plus JWT, I mean, if you're doing just regular JOT, without the full featured sort of OAuth framework around it, even that will use basic, right? It's there.
Yeah, and absolutely, yeah.
Client
so
credentials too.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. It is still used. So with a bit of luck, let's have a look at our logs again, so we can use Stern top tips. So
Readiness probe failed.
That is, yeah. So that happens anyway. So let's scroll back. So yeah, you see that all the time. Basically, it's because it's literally true that the readiness probe has failed because it's not ready yet.
Right.
So that's actually an error. That's a true error. But then it will be ready. So hopefully now I should be able to, if I do curl, I can't remember the name of the, so it's that one, wasn't it? So that should now, so unauthorized. So now, with a bit of luck, I should be able to say -u Alice test. There we go. That was it. And so we've taken what we've done. We've taken Kubernetes secret. We've ingested that into boot using environment variables. We've set up the Spring security config, so it takes that environment variable and uses the Kate secret value for the password of your basic authentication.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that is so
you.
cool.
Yeah,
it feels like half. It feels like half the battle for me in getting something working in the cloud is just getting one string from one place to another. Like, you imagine how an application goes from your machine to production, and everywhere along the way where you have to propagate environment variables. So your CI environment then gets used to generate the file full of environment variables that gets used by Kustomize to generate the config map, which then gets used by Kubernetes to create the environment variables for the container, which then gets used by Spring Boot to plug in the values for the actual properties. And it can be so fiddly. So everything you can do to remove some of the duplicative work, like you just did with Kustomize and all that, can be super useful.
Yeah, it's like all quick. It's tiny win. Lots of tiny wins in aggregate add up, make your life easier and easy to automate. So sort of demo wise, that's sort of all I had really. As I said, it would be, I'd love to sort of come back again and talk about Gateway. That's something I've been working.
I think everything you showed here is going to be super useful for people, right? I mean, this is the first step with Spring Boot is, how do I get it into production?
Yeah. And I only deployed this locally, but you could easily I published a product after this call, and I don't know if there's an easy way to share it with you. I'll tell you actually. I'll write it down here. It's just going to be OJ Hughes, and then top tips boot. So I'll create the GitHub project like that. OJ Hughes top tips boot. So I'll do that after this call and check it out on GitHub.
You read my mind. I was literally going to ask you that question.
Yeah.
Wait. OJ.
Awesome. Okay, so let's see. I guess, do you have other things, or should we just like all pop our faces back on here?
Yeah, for my end, that's demo wise, that's me done. So I guess I'll stop sharing now. Thank you. And I don't know if you've got any sort of Q&A or anything like that, but I'm happy to hang around.
Yeah, I was asking things along the way. I mean, I can also throw in a question that someone asked about regarding Spring Cloud Gateway in case you have the answer for it right now. So they said they haven't found anything on it except for gateway filter factories, but that's not working. They're currently trying to update their request body size and are trying to post things over the current limit of 3 megabytes. they're getting a 413 request entity too large.
Mm,
Do you
yeah.
have any idea about that off the top of your head?
Yeah, that does sound like that does sort of sound like there's some configuration. I suspect if you go and look at the kind of application properties available on Gateway, that's probably configurable. But Spencer Gibbs, your man, if that's not the right answer, then ask sort of Spencer on Gitter or on VMware Slack. He's usually the main man for the open source gateway. But I suspect there is a configuration property, not for the filter itself, but for the actual gateway, that you can adjust that sort of sets how big that body is.
Cool. Yeah. If that doesn't work, yeah, I got a Stack Overflow link that I will be passing along to Spencer.
Yeah.
Connections are nice. But yeah, thanks a bunch for doing this. And it was really cool, kind of just being like, oh, hey, you here, like showing here the stuff that you do with all these different applications. And then also like with KubeNS, there's also a Kube CTX, which Amit also makes, which you can switch between different contexts. So just like these fun, like different tools. And I was like posting the links for them along the way in the Twitch as you were talking about them.
Thank you. Yeah, and they are worth installing these different tools, because it's just less. No one likes typing if they don't have to, right? You know, just means you type less, which, you know, yeah, for me that's always a good thing.
You can do. There's all sorts of tricks you can do to switch contexts, to switch environments. You know, for Kubernetes, and somebody tweeted the other day, and it never even occurred to me that something so obvious would work, but you could literally just change an environment variable to point to a different kube context, kube config file.
Yeah.
And that would be enough. And I just like, I can't believe it's that easy. No wonder there's so many different solutions, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
None of them great, just a bunch of them.
Yeah, it's literally what it is. Yeah, it's changing some environment under the hood. Yeah.
Crazy. Well, this is fun. What was the biggest problem you had when you first got started with Kubernetes? What was the one thing that wasn't quite clear to you? I'm always curious from the beginner's perspective. I know it's for you, been several years, but what do you remember? What was the thing that was more, confusing, coming from whatever other things you'd come from?
Yeah, so I'd been working on Cloud Foundry sort of extensively before then, and I think probably the biggest thing was understanding when to use ingress, when to use service, what type of service to use, because it's kind of different depending on what you want to do. So usually I just try and keep it simple and set up the load balancer service like I demonstrated then, but then sometimes you need something more than that. You need to set up an ingress, and then you need, what ingress controller do I use? Do I use Nginx? Do I use Traffic? Or do I use Istio? And that's where you kind of start opening this can of worms when you get into the networking side of things. And then as soon as you start looking at things like service mesh, just the complexity gets even greater. But my general rule of thumb is to try and keep it as simple as you possibly can until such a time where that's not good enough, and then start exploring. Because you could start day one and say, oh well, Istio, amazing, that would do everything for me, and then you end up with something very complicated. But maybe you could have just done using a load balancer service and some simple Spring Cloud Gateway or something like that. Would be my general. That's how I've certainly experienced the Kubernetes, because it can be overwhelming when you start, especially when you start like seeing how many options there are to do things, different types of pod auto scaling, all these kinds of things.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. Totally.
Yeah.
I feel like it just is overwhelming. There's just so much stuff.
Yeah.
Well, this is very cool.
Well, if we don't have anything else, I will hit the end scene.
Thank you for having me. It was fun to be a guest co-host for the day.
Yeah.
Great
Thanks
session, Oliver.
I learned a lot. Being Paul for the day.
Nobody could be Paul. I love that guy.
Thanks.
And thanks everyone for joining us today. So yeah, now you all get to hide your cams. Bye.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.